He told me he was doing it out of love, said I'd be safer, happier, more comfortable with them, and I believed him. After everything I gave, everything I sacrificed, I still believed my son when he looked me in the eye and said, "Come live with us. Ma, you don't need to be alone anymore." But what I didn't know was that living with them would mean being boxed up like a seasonal decoration and hidden away in the basement. What I didn't know was that this so-called kindness was just the opening act in a revenge story I didn't even know I was starring in. My name is Lucinda Bray. I'm 76 years old, and I was a registered nurse for over 4 decades. I delivered babies in the snow during blackouts. I sat with dying men whose own families couldn't face them. I've cleaned blood, changed dressings, bathed strangers, and held hands through final breaths. I didn't complain. That's what you did when you were called to care. And I carried that same grit into raising my son, Kyle. His father, God rest his soul, passed away when Kyle was only 10. Cancer. Quick and cruel. I remember the look in Kyle's eyes at the funeral, small, scared, not yet hardened by what the world would later do to him. From that day on, it was just me and him. I worked overtime at St. Joseph's, sometimes picking up extra shifts just to make sure we'd have money for his baseball uniforms. The field trip to Springfield. The new backpack he was too proud to ask for. We never had much, but I gave everything I had. I skipped meals some weeks to pay for his school lunches, wore the same coat for 7 winters, every single birthday. I baked his favorite banana cream pie from scratch, even the year I had the flu. I still remember standing at the stove, dizzy with fever, stirring custard with a wet cloth on my neck. When he graduated from high school, I clapped louder than anyone in that gym. When he got his insurance license, I hugged him so tight he told me I was going to crush his ribs. I never missed a moment. Even when my knees started to ache and my memory wasn't as sharp as it once was. After I retired, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could rest a little, spend mornings with my tea, tend the little flower bed outside my porch, maybe even take a pottery class at the senior center. But the truth is, the house got too quiet. After my husband died, silence filled every room like fog, and as the years passed, that silence only got heavier. So when Kyle called and said, "Why don't you come live with us? Ma, you shouldn't be alone anymore," it felt like an answered prayer. I didn't hesitate. I told him yes. I packed my boxes with careful hands, folding towels I'd had since our first home, wrapping the wedding china I'd saved for someday, maybe a granddaughter's tea party that never came. He even came to help me load the moving truck. He smiled and said, "You'll love it at our place. No more stairs, no more cooking, no more worrying about bills. We'll take care of you now." I remember blinking back tears. I thought, this is it. This is what all those years were for. All those night shifts, the calloused hands, the late bill payments. It was for this moment. I thought I was going home. Rachel, his wife, greeted me at the door that day with a polite smile that barely reached her eyes. She said, "It's so good to finally have you with us." And I pretended not to hear the word finally laced with impatience. Their house was big, 3 stories, polished granite counters, those whisper quiet refrigerators you only see in commercials. My room was downstairs. They said, "Easier for you," Kyle added. Fewer stairs to worry about. It wasn't until I got there that I realized downstairs meant the basement. Unfinished walls, cold concrete floors, a twin bed with a fitted sheet already stretched tight over it, no comforter, 1 shelf for my belongings, tucked between a broken treadmill and boxes labeled Christmas. My boxes, my life, were stacked in the corner, still sealed. I sat on the edge of that narrow bed and tried to breathe through it. I told myself it was just temporary, just while they figured out the layout. That night, I heard Rachel laugh upstairs. "You really think she's going to be okay down there?" she asked. Kyle replied something I couldn't quite make out. I stayed silent. The next morning, my tea kettle was missing. I asked Rachel where it went, and she said it didn't match the kitchen aesthetic. "We're all using the electric one now. It's cleaner." My tea tasted like metal, but I said nothing. Day by day, things disappeared. My quilt, My favorite mug with the daisy on it. A small glass angel Kyle gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12. Gone. I asked about it once. Rachel shrugged. It didn't go with the shelves. I smiled. I nodded. But something inside me flickered. I offered to help cook. Rachel told me they had it covered. I offered to do laundry. She said she already had a system. I tried to sit at the table for dinner, but there were only 3 plates. They ate. I waited. Later, I'd find mine cold on the counter with plastic wrap over it, like I was a to-go order. Still, I stayed quiet. Still, I tried because I believed love, no matter how dusty, could be polished back to life. Because I believed my son would see me, not just as an obligation, but as the woman who held his head when he had night terrors, who patched his jeans with iron-on stars, who bled her back dry so he could have a better shot. I didn't know then what was coming. I didn't know that SUV was already parked in their driveway, clean, gleaming, full of secrets. All I knew was that I loved my son, and sometimes that's the most dangerous place to begin a story. The first week, I told myself I was just adjusting. I folded my sweaters even though the basement closet had no shelves. I swept the concrete floor even though Rachel insisted their cleaning lady handled the main spaces. I placed a small porcelain angel, one I managed to sneak from my old living room, on top of the plastic dresser Kyle had found on sale. I told myself this was still family. But by the second week, I knew. Kyle stopped saying Ma. Now it was Lucinda. Or worse, nothing at all. He'd walk past me like I was a hallway shadow. Rachel barely looked up from her phone when I came upstairs. Once, I offered to make my pot roast, his favorite. She said, Kyle's cutting red meat now. We're trying to be heart healthy. Then she added, smiling without warmth, but you're welcome to make something for yourself. So I did. One night, I made a small roast just for me. I sat in the corner of the kitchen because the dining table had a centerpiece set, and I ate alone. I chewed slow, and I tried not to cry. You ever try to swallow sadness with mashed potatoes? It sticks in your throat like grief. The next morning, the roast pan was gone. I asked Rachel. She looked me straight in the face and said, "Oh, it was rusted." I threw it out. You should really use those disposable trays. So much easier. Bit by bit, they erased me. The upstairs bathroom got a new sign, Kyle and Rachel only. My towels were moved. My shampoo vanished. They told me I could use the half bath near the laundry, the one with the flickering light and no lock, the one that always smelled like wet carpet. Kyle didn't say a word, and I started to realize I had become background noise, a fixture, not even a burden. A broom leaned in a corner. One day, I overheard Rachel on the phone while she was in the kitchen. I was standing at the top of the basement steps, out of sight. She still walks okay, but I give it 6 months before she needs help with basic stuff. Honestly, it's like living with a ghost. She just hangs around. Kyle feels bad, but he won't say it. You know how guilt works. Just let her rot quietly, I say. I clutched the stair rail so tight, I left nail marks in the paint. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, counting every time the basement furnace kicked on. I thought about every birthday I baked him a cake. Every time I sat in ER waiting rooms with him after a soccer sprain. Every time I said no to myself so he could say yes to the world. And now I was a ghost. Friends, if you've ever raised a child, poured your soul into them like I did, only to be spoken about like they're just waiting for you to fade out, then you know what I felt in that moment? It's a heartbreak no one writes poems about, but it burns. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever felt like your presence became an inconvenience in the life of someone you once carried? If you're nodding, keep listening, because I'm telling you this not to complain, but so you know you're not crazy or alone. They started bringing me food at odd hours, a bowl of soup at 3 p.m., a sandwich without napkins at 9. I stopped asking. My clothes disappeared from the laundry basket. Rachel said it was just to lighten your load. I had 4 shirts left. The SUV appeared on week 3, shiny, gray, new. Kyle grinned as he handed me the keys. So you don't feel trapped, he said. You've got independence. Ma, I blinked. Last week, he said I was too old to handle the microwave. Thank you. I said. Because my tongue hadn't caught up with my heart yet, Rachel added. It's insured and everything. We made sure. All official. She said official. The way some people say irreversible. That night, I stood at the basement window, tiny, half blocked by the ground outside, and watched the SUV glint under the street lamp. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a setup. I didn't have the words yet, but my bones knew. My gut knew. It wasn't just rejection anymore. It was erasure. Strategic. Polite. But cold as steel. You know the cruelest part? They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. They didn't slam doors or break dishes. No, they erased me slowly, kindly, like I was being unwritten, like I was a burden they had learned to carry just long enough to legally unload. And Kyle never once looked me in the eye when he said, "Thanks for dinner or night, Ma," because he wasn't thanking me. He was rehearsing. He was practicing the script for later, when they'd tell the insurance people I was slowing down and confused and liked to take long drives when stressed. I could feel it coming, but I didn't know yet how close it really was. I was still clinging to the last scraps of belief that maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe my son still saw me. But if he did, it wasn't as a mother. It was as a means, an obstacle. A check waiting to be cashed, and I had no idea how fast the fire was coming. The SUV sat in the driveway like it was posing for a photo shoot, polished, pristine, the kind of shine that made it look like something good was coming. But every time I looked at it, my stomach pulled tight. I told myself I was being silly. What mother doesn't feel off when her son suddenly becomes generous after weeks of silent cruelty? Still, the way they presented it, it wasn't a gift. It was a setup. Take it for a spin. "Ma," Kyle said, dangling the keys in front of me like he was rewarding a dog for sitting quietly. "Grocery store, church, wherever you want to go. You don't need to wait on us anymore." Rachel stood behind him, arms crossed, watching me like a cat watches a mouse. "It's all insured." "We added you to the policy," she said, voice sugar slick. "Everything's taken care of." That word again, everything. Wrapped in a bow and tied to a ticking clock I couldn't see yet. The first time I sat behind the wheel, I noticed a new blanket folded on the back seat, a little too neat. The dash still had that protective plastic film, the kind you leave on when you're not planning to keep it long. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and silence. I didn't drive it that day. I just sat there, staring at the road ahead, the ignition off. My hand resting on the key without turning. My heart pounded hard, like it was trying to speak before my mind could catch up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I woke around 2:30, throat dry, chest tight. I shuffled into the kitchen in my slippers, moving slow so the floor wouldn't creak and wake anyone. I was pouring a glass of water when I heard voices. Kyle and Rachel. Their bedroom door was cracked. The hallway light made a thin line across the floor, slicing through the dark like a warning. "Are you stupid?" Kyle whispered. "If the car explodes, it has to look like an accident. No evidence, no questions. You want to go to jail over this? I don't want to end up in prison for $4 million. "Kyle," Rachel hissed back. "That thing better go off right when she's on the overpass. No delays, no malfunctions." My body froze. Water spilled down the side of the glass, soaking into my nightgown. I didn't move. She's barely functioning anyway. Rachel went on. "That SUV is just like her. Looks polished, but reeks of decay. Just a shell. Disgusting. I can't even sit in the same room with her. Let's just get it over with," she said. "I want to be in Hawaii before winter." I stepped back from the hallway like it was on fire. My knees nearly gave out. I braced myself against the wall and slid down to the floor, breath shallow, pulse ringing in my ears like sirens. My water glass was still in my hand, shaking just enough to spill a little more down my arm. 2 people I had cooked for, smiled at, thanked for taking me in, were now planning how best to kill me, and not even in a moment of rage or desperation, but calmly, strategically, over warm lighting and late-night whispers like they were planning a vacation. They were going to burn me alive. That's when I knew I wasn't a burden. I wasn't even a mother in their eyes anymore. I was a payout, a shell. And worse, they weren't even conflicted about it. No hesitation, no guilt. I lay in bed for hours, frozen. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. It was something colder than fear, deeper than pain. It was the full realization that you were not only unloved, but seen as disposable by the very child you'd given everything to. When the sun rose, I felt like I'd aged 10 years, but I got up, brushed my teeth, made myself a cup of instant coffee, and smiled when Kyle walked in the kitchen like nothing had happened. He asked if I'd thought about where I wanted to go on my first drive. I said maybe the church down the road, somewhere peaceful. He smiled. Perfect. That stretch of road out there's pretty open. Great visibility. I nodded and took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like nothing, and yet I drank it all. That evening, I opened the medicine cabinet to check the new pills Rachel had given me. She said they were prescribed to help me sleep better. They looked different, light blue. The label had my name, but I didn't recognize the pharmacy. I'd worked with dozens in my years as a nurse. This one, never heard of it. It wasn't local. It wasn't listed online, and there was no prescription history in the medical folder I kept. The chill that had settled in my chest the night before crept deeper into my spine. Everything clicked. The SUV, the sudden politeness, the blanket in the back seat, the sleeping pills, the compliments, the forced smiles. It wasn't kindness, it was choreography. A perfect little dance to make my death look gentle. To make the news say, elderly woman lost control. Not son and daughter-in-law lit the match. They didn't want my suffering. They wanted my silence. They didn't want to fight. They wanted ashes. I stood in the middle of that basement room, hands at my sides, and let the truth pour over me like ice water. There was no love left in this house, only calculation. I had sacrificed everything, and in return, I had become a liability. But I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't tired anymore, and I sure as hell wasn't done. They thought I was a shell, but what they forgot is that even a shell has a core, and mine was steel. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the SUV keys. They were lying on the table like they meant something noble, like freedom, but now I knew what they really were. Bait. The basement was still. The laundry machine wasn't running. The furnace hadn't kicked on yet. And upstairs, I could hear the soft thud of Kyle's footsteps. Rachel was probably brushing her teeth, humming some out-of-tune pop song like nothing in the world was wrong. I didn't feel fear. I felt blank, not numb, just stripped, like everything soft had been peeled off and only the bone was left. I'd heard them talk about my death like it was just a part of the plan, a small task to check off. And something inside me clicked. I was done waiting for the love I had earned. After all the night shifts, all the skipped meals, the lost sleep, the scraped knees I kissed, and the asthma attacks I soothed at 2A. I had earned more than this, but I wasn't going to beg for it. Not anymore. I started moving. I went upstairs and opened the medicine cabinet where Rachel had left the new sleeping pills. She said the doctor prescribed them because I was so restless lately. That's funny. I hadn't seen a doctor in over 8 months, and no one had mentioned an appointment. The label had my name, sure, but the pharmacy, it wasn't any of the ones I used. It was somewhere out in southern Indiana. I'd never even been there. I snapped a photo of the bottle with the burner phone I had kept from my nurse days, a habit I never broke. Used to keep emergency contact numbers on it. Now it held my truth. Then I pulled down the little fireproof safe I kept hidden behind the water heater in the basement. Inside were my old records, medical history, bank statements, letters with my real signature. I opened the folder I had taken from Rachel's desk drawer 2 days earlier when they left for their Sunday farmers market trip. Inside, a life insurance policy for $1 million. My name, my birth date, my social security number. But the signature at the bottom, it wasn't mine. It looked like mine. The loops, the slant. But I knew better. I'd signed papers for 45 years. You remember your own handwriting when it's built from every tired, middle-of-the-night chart note you ever wrote? Kyle had forged my name. Rachel had notarized it using a fake stamp. They must have ordered it online. I flipped through the documents, and it got worse. Emails between her and the insurance broker. A message that said, "She's getting worse. Might need to process this fast." Another that asked about accidental death clauses involving fire. I had been a nurse. I had seen families do cruel things in the name of inheritance, but never like this, never with this kind of calculation. And now it was happening to me. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The papers trembled in my hands, not from age, but rage. Then, something shifted. I stood up. I walked to the mirror above the old dresser and looked myself straight in the eye. My face looked tired. My cheeks had fallen. My hair was thin at the crown, but my eyes were clear. I didn't feel grief. I didn't even feel sad, because grief is reserved for loss, and you can't grieve what you never had. I thought about how quiet Kyle was when he brought me the SUV, how Rachel had smiled just a little too hard when she handed me the key fob, how my favorite mug disappeared, how my food started tasting off. It had all been a play, a stage, a story they were writing with me as the dying old woman, confused, lost, disposable, except I wasn't confused. And I sure as hell wasn't lost. I needed someone smart, someone who would believe me without blinking, someone who wouldn't tell me to just leave or call the police and expect that to fix it. I needed Evelyn Thomas. Evelyn and I hadn't spoken in years, not really, but we sent Christmas cards. She was my best friend in high school, the kind of girl who never backed down from a fight. Went to law school at 40 after her second husband ran off with a woman half his age. She used to say, "Men think silence means weakness, but it just means they're not listening hard enough." I opened the back page of my old address book. Her number was still there, written in faded blue ink with a smiley face next to it. I called. She picked up on the second ring. Evelyn speaking. I took a shaky breath. "Eve, it's Jenny." Lucinda. "Bray." A pause, then a slow intake of breath. "Jenny, oh my God, are you okay?" I closed my eyes. "No, but I think I'm ready to be." I told her everything, not all at once. My voice cracked too many times, but I laid it out. The SUV, the whispers, the forged signature, the pills, the fake insurance, the coldness, the way Rachel said just a shell. Evelyn didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh, honey." She just listened, silent, firm, like a wall made of oak. Then she said, "Do not confront them. Don't change anything. Don't give them a reason to act early. I'll be there in 3 days. You keep your head down and your ears open." "Eve," I whispered, "they think I don't know." "Good," she said. "Then we're already ahead." When we hung up, I sat in the basement with the SUV keys in my hand and the insurance folder on my lap. I felt the weight of everything I had carried for years, quietly, lovingly, shift into something else. Not anger, not vengeance. Resolve. They had written me off as fading, as forgetful, as something they could sweep under the rug with one fiery crash. But I was none of those things. I was awake, and they had no idea what I just remembered. I didn't raise a monster to kill me, but he had raised one inside me, one that remembered everything. I started slipping, on purpose. 2 days after Evelyn called and told me to stay quiet, I began to act the part they wanted me to play. I let my sentences trail off mid-thought. I stared too long at the TV remote like I didn't know what it was. I left the kettle boiling until it screamed. Rachel burst into the kitchen that day, waving her arms like I'd set the house on fire. "The hell's wrong with you?" she snapped. I just looked at the steam and said, "I thought I turned it off." She narrowed her eyes. "Satisfied?" "It's starting," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "Told you." That night, I dropped a fork at dinner and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. I asked Kyle what day it was, even though I'd just looked at the calendar an hour before. He didn't answer. Just shared a glance with Rachel over the dinner table, the kind that says she's almost ready. They thought I was unraveling, but really, I was gathering every whispered plan, every loose comment, every little moment they let the mask slip because they believed I'd already stopped seeing clearly. Evelyn had given me a tiny recorder, Looked like a keychain. Fit right on my ring loop. She said, "You don't need to trick them. Just let them talk like they think you're not listening." So I did. One afternoon, Kyle came into the basement and handed me a blanket. "It's gonna get colder down here," he said. "We don't want you catching anything before the trip." Then he added, almost too casually, "Make sure you have your ID with you when you go to church this weekend, just in case something happens. You know." My thumb pressed the button on the recorder under the blanket. Click. Rachel wasn't as careful. She was sloppy with confidence. God, she's slow now. She said one night when she thought I was asleep on the couch, "It's like babysitting an expired library book. Just get it over with already." Click. Every moment became evidence. I kept my face empty. My steps slow. I let my voice tremble just enough when I said goodnight. I even pretended to forget Rachel's name once. She smirked like she'd won something. Let them think they were winning. Meanwhile, Evelyn was working. She'd called a contact at the ATF, someone she helped once in a malpractice suit back in the 90s. She submitted the photos of the SUV wiring, the forged signature comparisons, and the pill bottle from the out-of-state pharmacy. She also filed a formal report with the State Insurance Fraud Division, but she warned me, "This has to be timed right. Jenny, if we move too soon, they'll cover their tracks. You stay inside the story a little longer. Give me more rope to wrap around their necks." So I gave her rope. I started planting confusion where they could see it. Left milk in the cabinet, toothpaste in the fridge. I forgot how to open the SUV's hatch and asked Rachel to show me 3 times. She rolled her eyes like a teenager. Kyle gave a tired laugh, patted my shoulder, and said, "It's okay. Ma, soon you won't have to remember anything." He meant it as a mercy, but it sounded like a sentence. Evelyn visited once during that week. She came disguised as a home insurance inspector, clipboard, plain clothes, little car that didn't look like much. Rachel barely looked at her. Kyle stood with his arms folded like he was doing them a favor. She walked around the SUV, opened the hood, peeked inside. She didn't say a word, just nodded, smiled, took pictures. Later that night, she met me behind the backyard fence when the house was dark. "It's definitely rigged," she said. "Custom timer, remote triggered, likely tied to the ignition or door sensors." I didn't flinch. I just said, "Then we wait." Sunday morning came. That was the day they liked to leave me alone while they went to the farmer's market. Rachel wore her floppy sun hat and oversized sunglasses like she was in some magazine spread about faux organic living. Kyle carried an empty cooler he never actually filled. They left at 9:30, like always. I waited. Exactly 3 minutes after the garage door closed, I moved. No hesitation. I took the brown folder of evidence I'd been collecting, the recorder, my ID, and the burner phone Evelyn told me to keep on silent. I left everything else, the photo albums, the tea set, the old quilt, because none of it was worth what it cost me to stay. I didn't leave a note, not yet. I walked 3 blocks down to a corner gas station and got in the back seat of a gray sedan parked by Pump 6. Evelyn was driving. She didn't smile, didn't ask how I was. She just looked at me through the rearview mirror and said, "Ready." I nodded. More than ever. We didn't go far, just to a small, quiet 1-bedroom near the edge of town. Evelyn had rented it under her name, stocked it with canned soup, tea bags, and a notebook. "You'll stay here until the agents are ready," she said. I sat on the bed and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Safe, not victorious. Not yet, but safe. Back at the house, Rachel and Kyle came home around 11, and found the front door locked. They knocked, they called, they texted. My phone, now left in the bathroom sink, buzzed 6 times. Then Rachel saw the envelope I'd left on the kitchen counter, next to a plastic cup of cold tea. Inside was a single sentence. "Your mother didn't die in a car accident. She walked away from the fire you built. They never expected me to run, because they never expected me to wake up. They thought the old woman in the basement was already gone, but I was just getting started. The agents didn't knock the door down. They didn't come in with sirens blaring or guns drawn. That's not how justice moves when it's quiet and certain. They came as a routine vehicle inspection from the manufacturer clipboard. Ball caps, soft-spoken. Rachel answered the door in her robe. Kyle stood behind her. Still scrolling his phone, they let the agents into the garage without hesitation. Just a safety recall on that make and model. One of them said, "We'll need about 10 minutes under the hood." Rachel waved them through and went back to brewing her oat milk latte or whatever fake comfort she drank when pretending to be a caregiver. Inside, the agents opened the SUV's hood. They photographed the ignition relay, the added circuit board, the improper wiring that could only have been installed with intention. Not a factory issue, not an accident waiting to happen. A plan. One of the agents texted Evelyn a single word: confirmed. Within the hour, the paperwork was filed, arrest warrants processed, evidence logged, the recordings, the forged insurance documents, the emails Rachel thought she had deleted, the tampering charges, all laid out like a quilt of betrayal. And 2 days later, at 5:43 a.m., just as the sky began to blue over the streets of Elmwood Park, they were arrested. Rachel screamed first. She cried not because she was sorry, but because she couldn't believe it was happening. "Kyle," he went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from being caught so red-handed even your lies start choking. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and unlawful use of an explosive device, and tampering with a vehicle with intent to cause death. The judge denied bail. They didn't see me at first. I showed up at the courthouse the day their trial began. I wore all black, not because I was mourning, but because I'd earned the right to wear the color of clarity. Rachel wouldn't look at me. She kept her head down like a child hiding from a punishment she'd written herself. Kyle did glance once, scanning the courtroom like he was searching for a lifeline. When his eyes met mine, something in him crumpled, but I didn't flinch. I sat in the front row every day as the prosecution played the tapes. The one where Kyle says, "Just make sure the ignition kicks it off halfway to the bridge." The one where Rachel laughs and says, "She's just a shell. She reeks of death." The jury gasped. Some cried. The courtroom was still. Still the way a church gets right before a funeral. Evelyn took the stand with a folder so thick it looked like it had a spine of its own. She laid out every piece of evidence: photos, time logs, digital records, app downloads, signature analysis. One by one, she unraveled the story they tried to write for me. On day 4, Kyle asked to speak. He stood, trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "It was Rachel's idea. I didn't want it to go that far. I just wanted help. We were broke. I thought..." He turned to me. "Mom, you know me. You know I'd never hurt you. Please, say something." I didn't. Not then. Not yet. Because when someone you raised opens the door for your death and calls it necessity, they don't get to ask for your voice. On the final day of the trial, the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood. My knees ached, but my spine stayed straight. I walked to the stand and looked at the jury, then at the defendants, my son and the woman who married into our house and gutted it of every warmth it ever held. And I said, they thought my death was a shortcut. But what they didn't count on was that I'd lived long enough to see the truth. And I wasn't confused. I was quiet. There's a difference. Then I returned to my seat. The jury took less than 4 hours to deliberate. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. They were sentenced to federal prison. Kyle got 25 years. Rachel got 25. They'll serve at least 3/4 of that before even being considered for parole. They left the courtroom in shackles, dragging the weight they thought they'd escape by burning mine. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't write a memoir or go viral on TikTok. I just lived. Now, I rent a quiet apartment near the edge of the woods. There's one bedroom, a little kitchen, a porch where I drink tea in the mornings. Evelyn visits every Saturday. She brings lemon cookies and new crossword books. We laugh like we did when we were 17. Sometimes, I think about the SUV, how clean it looked, how perfect. But it was never a gift. It was a casket with a gas pedal. and I climbed out before the fire started. I don't speak to Kyle. I don't answer his lawyer's letters or the calls from distant cousins who now pretend they always worried about me. Because the truth is, I owe no one an explanation for surviving. I did what any woman with a heartbeat and a spine would do when backed into a corner. I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologizing. And I lived. I didn't win with shouting. I didn't win with revenge. I won by walking away and by proving, in the quietest way possible, that I was never confused. I was just watching. And if you're still listening, if this story touched something in you, something raw, something buried, then maybe you've known what it feels like to be erased by the very people you gave your life to. Maybe you felt like your voice didn't matter anymore. But let me tell you, silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. So if you've ever been called a burden, forgotten, or replaced, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not done. And your story still matters. Stick around, because here we remember women like you